Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. I'm Hitzir,
I'm Isa.
and this is our first episode of 2021, at least our first episode recorded in 2021. Genre Equality was sort of, recorded just a couple of days before the new year, but it was released on the first. I hope you have caught that also, that is on our Facebook page and our Mixcloud as per usual. You
Mhm.
can also find the links on my Twitter account. But here we are about to kind of clean up the dredges of 2020. While it was a terrible year, strangely there was actually a lot of good shit on TV and on film.
Yep.
And one of the bright spots of 2020, I felt, was that the complete lack of blockbusters really allowed independent films to shine.
hmm Yep. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like in any other year, like most of the films that we talked about, like in our previous episodes, like for example, Dick Johnson is Dead, etc., right? Probably wouldn't be getting the attention it's gotten because Black Widow will be eating up like 8 weeks of press, things like that. So I'm
Yep.
I'm really glad that like indie cinema hasn't really slowed down at all. Like, in fact, it's actually gotten a bigger platform because now they're being released on streaming, and
hmm
now they suddenly become like kind of hits. But what I wanted to talk about here on this episode was the indie movies that were great, but you probably missed.
Yep.
I said, did you catch any of these films before I recommended them to you?
No, no. I mean, the only Honeyland. No, no. Yeah. All of this kind of slipped past. I did see the trailer for the Nest,
Mm,
but not until we kind of discussed that we wanted to have it on the show.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like all three of these films are very very small films, and I think a lot of people may not have seen them, especially in Singapore, because I think Saint Francis only came out in the projector. I want to say like middle of the year, but didn't really have much hype behind it.
hmm
Honeyland technically, I know if you want to be like technical, it's 2019 release, but it only came to Singapore via the projector in 2020. So I consider it a 2020 release lah, because there was no other way for me to watch it other than the projector.
Yeah. Fair enough.
As for the Nest. Boy, even I didn't want to watch this one when I first saw the poster and everything. Literally, no idea what it was about. The title was super unevocative.
hmm
Trailer was meh meh. I only watch it because like I'm a big fan of Carrie Coon from The Leftovers.
Yep.
That's the only reason, and it was one of those like I watched it like the final few days of 2020, and I was like, ah, fuck, why didn't I watch this sooner?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
so these are the films that we'll be talking about lah. The Saint Francis is a bit of a millennial comedy
hmm
about a flailing 30 plus year old woman
Yep.
who is basically given a new lease on life when she becomes a nanny. Secondly, as I mentioned, The Nest is a bit of a 1980s haunted house horror without ghosts. We'll explain what that means later.
Yeah.
Basically, they're haunted by the ghosts of capitalism,
Mm.
and we'll discuss that. AKA, The Nest is actually the Max Lord story that we didn't get to see.
Yeah.
Uh,
Pretty much.
yeah, I thought that too, right? Because it's 80s.
Yeah. Exactly.
And Honeyland is a bit of an anthropological documentary that's very observational.
hmm
Doesn't lead you anywhere with any voiceovers or interviews or anything. It's just an observational portrait of a lonely rural beekeeper in Macedonia
Yep.
that stumbles into an environmental conflict. We'll talk about that later. But let's begin with Saint Francis, of course. This was brought in by anticipated. I mean, yeah, I anticipated it. It was brought in by Anticipate Pictures mid last year,
hmm
and it focuses on a flailing 34-year-old Bridget, played by Kelly Sullivan, who also wrote and directed this and starred in it, of course. She is a bit directionless in life, has no career, has no ambition. Finally, she catches a break when she meets a nice guy and lands a much needed job nannying a 6-year-old named Frances, who
hmm
is played by a scene stealing Ramona Edith Williams. But unfortunately, an unwanted pregnancy introduces an unexpected complication.
Yep.
To make things worse, she clashes with the obstinate Francis. They don't get along very well at the beginning, at
hmm
least, and struggles to navigate the growing tension between Francis's lesbian moms amidst her tempestuous own personal relationships and a reluctant friendship with the 6-year-old emerges, and Bridget contends with the inevitable joys and the shit shows of becoming a part of someone else's family, even if she
Yeah.
doesn't have plans to have her own.
Mhm.
Yeah, really loved this kind of frank, no bullshit portrait of a millennial woman. This may sound like hollow praise, but I feel like this is kind of like Lena Dunham done right. Finally, um, what did you think about Saint Francis?
Oh, I really enjoyed Saint Francis. Just the chemistry of the main relationship between nanny and child was so charming, and like Ramona Edith is absolutely the cutest thing. Some
Great
of the
child
lines,
actor.
yeah, the some of the lines that she gets are amazing. Even from like the onset of the film, like when they first start to meet, like she's just throwing shade all the time, and I love it. I love it. I'm there for it. Um, I think it's a very interesting kind of portrayal of the struggles of, I guess you would call it elder millennial, right? Like she's 34.
Mm,
There's even a discussion with her, you know, guy, friend, partner, beau, whatever you
mhm.
want to call it, because like clearly she hasn't quite defined what that is, despite the fact that he's seeing her through the entire process of getting the abortion and so on and so forth.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, like she accuses him of being millennial, and he says you are millennial too, and she says no, I'm on the cups of that, and I think that's kind of a very interesting way of like looking at the approach to this, like
Mm,
her inability to kind of be in touch with her own emotions as we go through her journey here, right? The growing kind of relationships that she had on the romantic front, on the work front, the kind of like sideline uh, adventures that she has,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and even like her clashing with these two very clearly liberal women in the
Uh
form
huh.
of Francis's parents is a very kind of interesting millennial dilemma, right? I think that it's all a very fascinating study in the way in which she navigates all of that.
Mhm.
There are times when I feel as though the way it's told, in particular, her relationship with the guy, is a bit messy. Like
Mm.
you don't really get, because they have a lot of like jumping in terms of the timeline, what exactly their relationship is like. And because it's not the primary relationship, right? Like we only catch glimpses of that. And I wish we could have explored that a bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
But at the end of the day, not to take away anything from a very, very solid performance
Mm.
by both Kelly and by Ramona as well. Like, such a joy to watch them interact. I mean, like,
Mhm.
there's so many great moments there. They are both like comedic and dramatic and just overall like very, very heartfelt.
Yeah.
Um, I love it. It was a fun watch, I think,
Mhm.
despite um the fact that it does deal with her coping with the abortion
And
um
everything else,
and
right?
everything
Yeah.
else, yeah, like, but it was still like a fun watch to see how we heal, right? Like
Yeah.
how we heal our relationships, and how sometimes childlike wonder is such an important part
Mhm.
of rediscovering yourselves and rediscovering your relationships.
Yeah. I think Kelly O'Sullivan really took a fresh approach to kind of a formula that I've seen before. The disaffected, unattached millennial. The ennui laden person, grasping for meaning, and then they kind of form a relationship with a child who forces her to grow up and face the real world. In all its cute and terrifying glory. It's kind of been done before. But like
Yeah.
writer and star Kelly O'Sullivan kind of turns the premise into something wise and witty, because Saint Francis feels so loose, so messy,
Hmm.
so very real. There is very little unorganic about the stories being presented here.
Yeah.
Even the portrayal of Francis's mother, one of her mothers, with postpartum depression,
Hmm.
also feels very real.
Yeah.
Kelly O'Sullivan, what she does here, again, I gotta say, it's like Lena Dunham done right, like like, I mean, a lot of people have done it before, like Broad City is also like Lena Dunham done right,
Yeah.
and this is another one lah. There is this kind of follows a trend of very ultra realistic millennial stories. Do you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
Master of None kind of type.
Mhm.
very honest, like, and I really like these kind of stories. And this was a very special indie movie to me that I watched last year. I did not expect it to rank that highly on my top 25.
Yeah.
It didn't break the top 10 quite, but it was almost there. This was great, man. I loved all the performances here. Kelly
Mm.
Sullivan, especially because she wrote, directed, edited, and
Yep.
stars in it. She's in every single frame, which I didn't notice until I rewatched it. She's in every scene.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much she does in this film, though.
Mhm, mhm.
But it doesn't make it easy going, especially the relationship between Francis and Bridget.
Yep.
The bond unfolding, it kind of fits and starts as the
Mhm.
two leading ladies, shall we say, although one is not a lady, learn their way around each other and themselves. I love that they embrace that neither are perfect,
Yeah.
and Kelly O'Sullivan projects such deep empathy into Bridget, into Francis, into Francis's mothers, that
Mhm.
it's difficult to stay angry at them, even when they make mistakes.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, this is great. Even how they approach abortion, and everything is really just so frank. There's no like,
Mhm.
it's very different from Never Ready Sometimes Always,
Yeah.
but it is similar in the fact that it's just very honest
Mhm.
with its approach to it.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely isn't as visceral. I mean, there's a fair bit of blood, but it isn't as visceral as Never Sometimes Always maybe.
Yeah.
Um, but it has its own charm. I mean, like it definitely is a notable mention from last year. It's not perfect though. I
No, it's not
don't
perfect. Yeah.
I don't understand that whole like side quest with with the music teacher. Like that whole part I could have done without.
Mm-hmm.
Because it didn't. I mean, like it felt like one of those. Oh, okay, she's going to learn a lesson here, but I had no idea what the lesson was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like the build up of characters for the two mothers felt a little rushed.
Yep.
Like because we are so focused on what Bridget is doing, right, for the first kind of half. And then
Mm-hmm.
as we approach her, only then do we get to know the mothers, and it's a lot at one time. To be fair, they are going through a lot as a family, so that's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that did feel a bit rushed. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
many great payoff moments, so
Mm-hmm.
many just like great lines. I think my favorite is that "Why am I crying? I'm a agnostic feminist." It's
Yeah.
one of my favorite lines from the show.
Yeah, I think the emotional climax really hinges on the film's strengths, and they really
Mhm.
do pay off all the stuff that we like about the film.
Yeah.
The result is very satisfying. It's hard won. A very unusual coming of age story for a 30-plus year old, but
Yep.
it's great because it turns out like there are a lot of things that have kind of gone unsaid in films, and coming of age doesn't just have to be in adolescence. It can be
Hmm.
at any point of life.
Yeah.
In fact, like I would classify a lot of midlife crisis films as coming of age as well. You're just coming to a different age, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, enjoyed this exceptionally frank, very refreshingly non-judgmental indie,
Yeah.
and it has a really no nonsense approach to issues of gender, abortion, child rearing, motherhood. It's it's very funny, as we mentioned. It leaves ample room for laughter. It's
Yeah.
not messagey in any way, and it's anchored by like delicate, moving performances from
Mm.
O'Sullivan and the rest of the crew. Lah.
Mhm. Mhm.
You may kind of figure out where it's gonna end.
Yep.
At least I knew it was gonna end. It was pretty obvious. But the the journey to get there and the ending itself doesn't lose any of its power just because I knew where it was going.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, but that being said, right, with the way it ended and all that, we're not going to spoil it.
Hmm.
I would love to see a second movie. Like, if they made a second movie just about, Bridget and Francis kind of like growing up together, whether they're together or separate, and that relationship, I would love to see that.
Yeah, yeah, same man, same. And if she can imbue that kind of like um honest, very sharply observed kind of character study
Hmm.
again,
Yeah.
a sequel is definitely in my books as well, man. I would definitely be happy for it, but I doubt it. I think Kelly O'Sullivan is one of those that's just gonna, they're not gonna try to franchise something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a great debut feature from him.
Uh,
I'm eager to see whatever she does next, whether it is uh, a sequel or whether it is another film.
mhm.
And I want to see how this child actor grows up. See whether see whether she is Drew Barrymore or Natalie Portman, or
Yeah.
whether she's one of those other child actors like Macaulay Culkin that failed.
Yeah. I hope not. I hope not. I really do like Ramona Edith Williams. I think she's a lot of promise to be that age and to be to deliver lines with such gumption. It's just really
Hmm.
quite something. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Next up, let's talk about The Nest. Man, was such an unevocative title. Like I said, I'm a very big fan of Carrie Coon, who I loved in The Leftovers. I think she's
Yeah.
like an amazing actress.
Hmm.
I mean, of course, Jude Law is great too. But another reason I watched it is also because I like Sean Durkin. I haven't seen him write or direct the film in
Yeah.
about 7 or 8 years. It's been a long time. So there were a couple of reasons why I decided to jump into this, despite being totally uninterested in it.
Hmm.
And let me tell you, when you watch the trailer for this, you
Oh my
will be
god.
uninterested in it as
Yeah.
well.
Absolutely.
The thing is, right, like it really hides a little very mature gem of a movie here.
Yeah.
It follows a character named Rory,
Hmm.
who's played by Jude Law. He is an ambitious entrepreneur and a commodities broker. He has a perfectly happy life in America with his
Hmm.
wife, Allison Carrie Coon, and their two children. But he convinces them to leave the comforts of suburban America and return to his native England during the 1980s. He senses opportunity. So Rory rejoins his former firm and leases a centuries old country manor with grounds for Allison to build a stable. She actually rears horses for a living.
Yeah.
Soon, the promise of his lucrative new beginning starts to unravel when he makes a series of increasingly unwise business decisions. Then the couple have to face the unwelcome truths lying beneath the surface of a happy family. Like it just widens the cracks that were already there. And I really love that this was my favorite haunted house horror of 2020 that did not have ghosts. So much of its visual design built on the visual tropes of the genre. It frequently
Yeah.
feels as if, like, there's something sinister lurking around every corner, the creaks and everything.
Hmm.
There's something about houses in films that become a metaphor for the mind of the inhabitants.
Yeah.
Uh, a house that is possessed by ghosts or malevolent spirits, kind of like, it's a metaphor for the house turning on you. And in this case, it's a family turning on themselves. It is envy and capitalism turning on them, or
Hmm.
warping them into something they don't recognize.
Yeah.
It's very sinister and terrifying, but not in the way that you think. Not in typical haunted house horror movies. It is sinister and terrifying in watching the dissolution of a marriage
Yeah.
between Rory and Allison.
Mm.
Carrie Coon, I think, again, knocks it out of the park. She's one of my favorite actresses here. There is a sequence late in the film that is just, I think, Carrie Coon dancing in the disco. That
Yeah.
has to be like one of my
Oh
favorite
my god.
sequences of
It's so good.
2020.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. But what do you think about the Nest?
When I saw this on the list of things that we were going to cover, I was just like, really? Are
Yeah.
you serious? Because we didn't really discuss it. Before that,
Mm,
I had already watched the trailer. I
mm-hmm,
mean, always been kind of a big fan of Jude Law, and of course, Kun. Well, I haven't really watched that much of the Leftovers, but I saw her in Fargo,
mm,
and big fan of what she can do.
mm.
So okay, I like you, I was willing to kind of give it a chance. I wasn't expecting to have this package of a movie there. Like Jude Law is peak Jude Law here, kind of.
Yeah, very underrated for this performance.
Yeah, and it's still kind of an understated performance, right? It's not a part. I mean, the character is loud, but the performance isn't loud. You know,
Hmm.
you get what I mean? And it feels like it's a combination of like just so many characters that he's played over the years.
Mm.
Um, So it really does feel like very peak Jude Law. But as good as Jude Law's performance was this year, Gary Coon just steals the show.
Yeah,
Oh my
man.
god. Like such amazing like technical acting. It's insane.
Yep.
Just remember the way that she delivers her lines, the kind of small looks that she gives, the sometimes the judgment in her eyes is kind of insane, right?
Hmm.
Just and being able to see the two of them play off of each other, really is quite amazing. But the standout to me is that when they're alone in different scenes, like Kun is just flawless. Like her performance is just one of a kind, and
Hmm.
that in and of itself, right, is the entire reason to watch the movie. Outside of
Hmm.
the fact that there's so many other good things as well. The house is gorgeous. The cinematography is creepy and beautiful at the same time. The music is evocative. I do feel like the kids delivered pretty good performances as well. They
Yeah.
played their role essentially, but the kind of disillusion of the marriage as it goes along because of these materialistic tendencies and this kind of like flagrant excesses that they've come um they've come to live with, right? Or they've come to terms with.
Or at least like Rory has kind of forced upon them. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think Carrie Coon's character or the children ever wanted this kind of life.
Yeah, I don't think they do, but I do feel like she never quite comes to terms with her own kind of materialistic tendencies.
Yes, yeah.
Like there are parts whereby that goes under the radar just because of how flamboyant Rory wants to live it up, right?
Mm,
But that doesn't take away from the fact that she too has a part to play with the financial situation that they're in, and I
mm-hmm,
don't think we ever got to deal with that, right? Which is fascinating and kind of like plays very nicely into the ending that we got.
mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like it's fascinating. I really, really, this was really one of those things that I was just going in like, okay, let's just see what this is about.
Yeah.
And to have to kind of like be able to see these kind of performances in a movie that honestly like no one kind of like talked about, no one kind of knew.
Mm-hmm.
Is it's surprising. I really have to say, yeah.
Yeah, it has such great storytelling control,
Mm,
very precise, very mature. Every tiny emotional shift and new resentment between the couple registers, builds to more profound conflict. And though the plot is kind of tightly focused on the central couple,
yeah.
powered by career best work from both actors,
Mhm,
um, Durkin is spinning this larger yarn about a decade of excess, set
yeah.
in the 1980s, and the illusory appeal of upward class mobility. The nest kind of denotes that wealth can rot the spirit as badly as a supernatural possession, for example.
Mhm.
A message that transcends its period setting. Interestingly enough, I watched the nest and Wonder Woman 1984 back to back, not knowing. Not knowing the thematic similarity,
Yeah.
that like the nest is essentially like the Max Lot story done right.
Yeah, yeah. It's Max Lord's backstory, right? In our head canon, or it could be at least.
Right, like this, like really, like if this was Max Lock's backstory, I would be so much more into that villain.
Oh yeah,
Because
absolutely.
the motivations for Rory, like we are constantly complaining when we're watching the film. Like, at least I was complaining to myself that why is Rory doing this? This is unnecessary. You're making like too many. You're taking too many unnecessary risks
Yeah.
financially and stuff like that. But then you kind of learn about his roots and his inferiority complex
Mhm.
growing up working class in London, especially during the Margaret Thatcher era. Yeah, he was such an interesting character. Not so much an antagonist, but not a protagonist either.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what an interesting character study.
Absolutely. I mean, like it is. It's just one of those like types, right? That you get, with what DiCaprio did with Wolf of Wall Street and these or even like what we Gatsby, right? For example,
Hmm.
and it's fascinating. It's very fascinating take on that character type, right? Like it gives it a lot more depth than I've seen in other similar kind of characters as well.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they took the time to explore where his origins and his backstory, because otherwise I would have very little empathy, really,
Hmm.
right? And, you go from the beginning, especially before that, I'm just like, who is this asshole, right? Just kind of like dragging everybody in the wake of his desire to be, the man, right?
Mm.
And then you learn, you become a bit more compassionate to his motivations when you find out his backstory. I became a little less empathetic of Allison, of Carrie's character,
Mm.
as their relationship kind of unfolds, and as you kind of see the way that she acts out very subtly, right, in trying to fight against what she feels is being imposed on her, but
Mm.
at the same time not being able to, or not even being aware of her own kind of like excesses and her own kind of like uh motivations and emotions as well.
Mm.
So like it is a very, very complex character studies for both main characters that plays out in an amazing kind of setting. Like the house is really beautiful, um but it just kind of like sets the tone, right? And like I think if you didn't tell anyone anything,
Yeah.
yeah, the first 5 minutes you would have thought it was a setup for like a proper horror show.
Yes, exactly, right. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a near perfect film here. It's not quite perfect, but
Yeah.
it is kind of the cinematic equivalent of those like short stories. It feels like a very nice contained short
Mm,
story, that is direct and devastating without overdoing it. It unfolds in a way that smart people tend to express, their disappointments.
yeah.
They get it out, they regain emotional control, divert, well, if you can.
Yeah.
It's a somber, grown up sort of movie with really remarkable poise and maturity,
Mhm.
and a level of craft so compelling and so subtle that it just doesn't evoke any interest in marketing. This is
Yeah.
such a hard movie to market. Like
Yeah.
if I worked, I don't know what the studio is, but I worked in this studio. I would have no idea on how to pitch this like
Yeah.
to a broad audience.
Well, I mean, like, and clearly they didn't, so it got the marketing it deserves. Speaking
Yeah.
of like length, right, of it, like I was surprised that it was only an hour and 40 minutes long because it felt longer, and not in a bad way.
Mm.
Maybe it's just like how dense, kind of like the things that they were exploring were, that it felt very meaty for its runtime.
Yeah, yeah, it's a complex movie despite its economical size.
Yeah, yeah.
And wow, I mean, again, the counterpoint to Wonder Woman 84.
Yeah,
Which was not economical.
yeah.
Its length time actually runs contrary to its message about access.
Hmm, hmm.
Yeah, very tremendous performances all around here. If you're not familiar with Carrie Coon, I suggest that you go watch this and
Yeah.
then go find like The Leftovers, which like I know I said career best here, but The Leftovers was really her best work. But
Hmm, yeah.
yeah, this is quite similar to a character there, anyways, lah. And movies almost never deal with marriages with this amount of like intricacy. Usually
Yeah,
it's so like broad, like, oh, you cheated on me, like etc etc, but this
yeah,
one is it's all of those. It's finances, it's schooling, it's finding the right work life balance.
yeah, yeah.
With the exception of Marriage Story, I haven't really seen it done like this well.
Yeah, I mean, but Marriage Story is kind of like a different monster on its own, right? Like it doesn't. I don't feel like Marriage Story explodes the facets of marriage that they do in the nest.
No, no, yeah,
Um,
but it explores the relationship after the marriage, lah,
yeah, yeah,
so to speak. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
The Marriage Story is almost a sequel to this, lah. If like if they divorce,
yeah.
yeah, very very like elegantly composed and precisely constructed. Really like this film. I know you would not want to watch this, but please do.
Yeah, if we can convince any of you to just kind of catch this, like it's a short watch. It really is, and it's like some really really good acting. So give it a shot.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Next up, let's talk about Honeyland. Wow. This is again a 2019 film, but it only came to Singapore in 2020.
Yep.
As I stated, like in my top 25 films of 2020, that I live in Singapore, and I will only consider movies released in Singapore either via streaming, virtual film festivals,
Mhm.
or stuff like that. Stuff that I can get my hands on to be 2020 films.
Yeah.
Which is why I considered stuff like Waves and Little Women to be 2020 films, although they technically were released in late 2019 in America.
Hmm.
But Honeyland, again, one of those, it is an anthropological um, documentary, very observational. It follows a lonely rural beekeeper in Macedonia,
Yeah.
and it kind of stumbles into a conflict halfway,
Mm.
when new neighbors move in into her land, and begin less environmentally conscious farming methods that threaten her livelihood.
Yeah.
So it's nice. It's apparently the documentary filmmakers just started following Hatits, I think that's the name, the
Yeah.
the, the beekeeper who makes a living cultivating honey using like very ancient beekeeping traditions.
Mm.
So they wanted to follow her. They wanted to follow her relationship with her mother who is ailing, how she takes care of her, the struggle with her living in rural Macedonia. They did not expect the family next door to move in.
Yeah.
They stumble into this amazing allegorical conflict that is representative of so much of the world right now. One
Hmm.
is living off the land sustainably. The other tries to make a profit, a quick buck, basically by pillaging the land.
Yeah.
And it completely disregards Hadzi's advice, because they start out as friends. She tries to give them advice, but they never take it.
Hmm.
Except for maybe one member of the family, that the son kind of sees that the dad is in the wrong,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
gravitates more towards the beekeeper. But yeah, like, this is such a great, lush, visually gorgeous documentary. It kind of it's almost a nature documentary in a sense,
Yeah.
with a lot of humanist undertones. It captures such beauty and empathy without a voiceover leading you to think one way or another,
Mhm.
without experts telling you to think one way or another. Just a lovely portrait of a lonely Macedonian beekeeper. What an unusual subject.
Yeah, and I mean, it is so it is so plain and simple
Mm,
in the fact that it's unadorned, right? Like, it's very direct and unadorned, like the approach that they decided to take. I was just reading up a bit about, like, how why they were making this, and how they kind of like stumbled onto the
the
plot.
conflicts.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
conflict, like the narrative actually moves forward out by actual accident.
Yeah.
um and it's really really kind of fascinating. I think, like, for me, what really sums up the beauty of this movie is when Hadith is just sitting and talking to the bees, right, that she's
Mm-hmm.
just moved into the wall, and she's negotiating the agreement for their relationship, right,
Yeah.
with the bees as she talks to them.
Yeah.
And that, me, kind of like, that was the point in time when I was like, okay, like, I think there's something here, like, let's see where this goes, right. And this is
Mm.
way before any sort of conflict
Mm-hmm.
kind of like arises, right, before the
Yeah.
introduction of the neighbor itself. And it's amazing that they caught that sequence
Mm.
when they did, because, like, that really kind of like plays out in the most unexpected way, I feel.
Mm.
Very very heartwarming, extremely beautiful. Some of the scenery around this little hamlet in Macedonia is just like
Mm-hmm.
breathtakingly gorgeous.
Yeah.
And To have this very kind of like small story with such large implications to
Mm-hmm.
what it is to live in nature, and how to treat nature, and be reciprocal with the way that we live in our world,
Yeah.
is kind of mind-blowing, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, right, like what you were saying, the original version of Honeyland, that the filmmakers had in mind,
Yeah.
that original version, this anthropological documentary that kind of just focuses on a disappearing way of life,
Yeah.
that in itself would have been a great documentary,
Yeah.
even if they didn't stumble into the conflict. It's
Yeah.
just like a sheer stroke of luck, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, and I enjoyed the unassuming kind of languidness to the film. It's very quiet and passive, and it's
Mm.
kind of very content to luxuriate in place and revel in solitude, which uh, uh some people might find it draggy. I like the narrative's loose pacing because it
Yeah.
instills a certain natural structure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that becomes almost mesmerizing once you get into it.
Mm.
It's a great documentation, as I said, on a disappearing way of life, lah. And
Yeah.
watching Hattie spend time caring for her bees, which she keeps in like these stone walls of old structures, and in the rocks of cliffs, instead of modern bee boxes.
Yeah.
And her mother, her approach to beekeeping is almost spiritual and environmentally conscious. This consciousness is not progressive. Keep in mind, because
Yeah.
like you might want to say like, oh, she's so progressive, she's sustainable.
Mhm.
It's not. It's rooted in deep tradition. It was this way. She has respect for the bees and the natural world itself. Yeah, she sells honey in the markets of Macedonia's capital city, Skopje.
Mhm.
But she refuses to collect more than half the bees' honey at a time, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that says a lot about her already.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there are just these moments of very intimate, almost voyeuristic kind of like exchanges that she has with her mother in particular, right? Like,
Yeah.
for context, for those of you that are listening, the mom is 85, she's partially blind, and she's basically bedridden. So
Mm-hmm.
all obviously this is her caretaker. The exchanges that they have, and there are a lot of exchanges in this really kind of like claustrophobic and very small room.
Mm-hmm.
um feel very very intimate, and like it it kind of like switches from extremely banal, kind of like, oh, this is what I did today, I sold the honey for this much, to like really kind of big issues at the same time, where she talked to her mother about her impending, passing away, and then what she's going to do and all of that. Like, all of those things have such a natural way of revealing what her character is.
Mm.
Everything from the beginning of the movie, where she's just like going out and like interacting with people in the market, right? Like, you catch a whiff of how shrewd she is and how clever she is, right? And how much she understands that, as much as the bees have a part to play in the ecosystem where she lives, right? Like, she also is a part of this greater kind of like capitalist system, and she needs to be able to play that in order to survive. And every step of the way, it does not feel put on. It doesn't feel, there's no pretense there, right? Like, even with the camera nearby, like,
Mm-hmm.
she feels very true. And that really g- that really helps to invest you in her story, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
only becomes even more interesting when the other people come in.
Yes,
Yeah.
the family next door is interesting also because I like that they're humanized too.
Yeah.
They clearly, this family, there's a lot of them. It's a huge family. They are clearly in dire straits. There are a lot of mouths to feed and not enough to go around. They are
Mhm.
dirt poor. The father Hussein is eager to dive headfirst into anything that can support his family,
Yeah.
any money making endeavor that he can. And the situation becomes heart wrenching and unavoidable when he makes one desperate choice after another, and Hussein kind of erodes Hatiz's way of life.
Yeah.
The metaphors at the heart of Honeyland become clear in that dichotomy. Because Hussein is of course a child of the modern world. His hand is in many ways forced by necessity,
Yeah.
but the consequences of his actions decimate the natural balance that Hatiz has so embraced and relied upon.
Mhm.
It's writ large throughout the entire film. This dichotomy, it's nonetheless handled with care. I think Hussein comes off as controlling and belligerent at times, especially
Yeah.
towards his children. But the world he inhabits is so harsh, that you come to understand that there's no guarantee where the next meal is coming from for this family. So
Yep.
it's difficult to blame him necessarily as the only culprit for this for this conflict. It's more
Yeah.
of the societal constructs that have propped up around him that have forced him to be this way.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, like, I found, as annoyed as I was with his character and the
Yeah.
decisions that he was making, like, I understood those decisions. Like, those aren't choices, or even like, well, they're business decisions, like, at the end of the day, right? Like,
Mhm.
he is, how do I maximize my bottom line? How do I maximize my profit, right? Given the resources that are there. And I understand those, right?
Mhm.
But to put it up against, right, Hadid's way of life and her way of thinking and her way of going about things, right, that is tried and tested and true,
Yeah.
right? Those arguments, as logical as they may seem to most of
Mhm.
us living in this strange kind of like late stage capitalism
Yeah.
that we have right now, like, it rings so empty,
Mm.
and the documentary shows that to be true in the results of those decisions, right? And like, incredibly powerful. But again, like, it's amazing how they managed to make this. The
Yeah.
story tells itself, right? And I'm envious of the fact that they were in the right place at the right time to catch this story. Because it's hard to script that. It's hard to script something like that. It's hard to get the kind of quality that you get with an actual real life story playing out. It's quite,
Yeah.
yeah.
The reason I compared it to a nature documentary, I mean, of course, there's a nature theme going on here, but the
Yeah.
reason I compared it to a nature documentary is I felt like the approach to Hatits and beekeeping is similar to, let's say, BBC's approach to Planet Earth or Blue Planet, in
Uh-huh.
that you just have a bunch of guys sitting there, fly on the wall,
Yeah.
try to be as unobtrusive as possible. You wait there for like years, you capture all this footage, hoping to stumble onto something
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And they do like the filmmaking here is one of patience and one
Hmm.
of observation. They're not trying to lead the characters or the subjects in any way to
Yeah.
make it more of an interesting story. Yeah, I mean that's why I compared it to a nature documentary. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a human nature documentary.
Yeah. It really reminds me. I mean, as I was watching this, it really reminded me of a lot of the stories that we've actually covered before, like Wolfwalkers, like
Yeah.
Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, like Princess Mononoke, like these whole allegories, right, for our relationship with Mother Nature, and it's and the choices that we make, right,
Mm-hmm.
in order to survive and or prosper.
Yeah.
But to see it take place like this is just like the form of it just surprises me.
Yeah. Yeah. And Hussein is just a different version of Rory from the Nest.
Yeah, yeah.
Just in a different context and on a different level, but in essence they are creatures. The greed inside of them is crafted through other things, through a society of access, through a capitalistic system. It's great. Like, I love this film so much. Like, when I went to watch it at a projector
Mhm.
last year, there was like no one there. Like, I was so sad. Like, this is a really interesting, I mean, admittedly, some might say boring film, but I didn't find it boring at all. I found it mesmerizing.
Yeah,
I love the loose pacing. I love the natural structure of it.
yeah. I feel like, I mean, given that we watch so much, right, and so much of the time, like everything is scripted, the pacing is intentional, it's purposeful, and all of that, right? Just to be
Hmm.
able, this is a breath of fresh air to
Hmm.
have a story delivered to you in this form with
Hmm.
like as much punch, right, as strong of a message as possible without being preachy at the same time, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to find film like this, something that is so real and so powerful at the same time,
Hmm.
right? That just is right. It's quiet and powerful and intimate, and there's no need to kind of like shout on the hilltops about it, or there's no need to for any kind of pretense, and it's a rare thing I think in film these days. So I definitely highly recommend Honeyland.
Yeah. Definitely, man. Before we cap it off, right? Like, I know I didn't prep you for this before, but you've seen a bunch of films last year already.
Yeah.
What would be like your top five of 2020?
Ooh. Off the top of my head, damn. I actually didn't really think about it because you do the heavy lifting for that kind of every year. Uh wow.
I mean, it can be genre as well. There was a lot of good genre stuff this year too.
Well, I'm drawing a blank. Maybe I should look through. Wait, where's our list of things that we've done? Uh, you're putting me in a tough spot. Hits.
Oh, that's okay, man. Well, in any case, maybe I'll say like some of the notable mentions that we haven't talked about
Yep.
yet.
Mhm.
Primarily because, like, it's not that I don't think that these are bad films.
Yep.
I think that they just weren't good enough, but that have like one or two qualities that are so special that I do feel I have to mention them.
Yep.
Number one, that we didn't talk about last year was Sound of Metal. It is
Mm,
Riz Ahmed's movie. He turns in a brilliant performance here as Ruben in this very passionate character study of a heavy metal drummer who's going deaf. You know, how Darius Marder, who is the director, uses sound design to convey uh, the struggle of coping with hearing loss.
yep.
It's so wonderful. Riz Ahmed deserves an Oscar nomination for his performance here. The movie overall maybe doesn't cohere as a whole. It's good but not great.
Mhm.
But Riz Ahmed's performance is great. Another thing do have to mention, something that came out in December as well.
Yeah.
It's a film called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Oh,
It
I've heard
is
that. Yep.
Chadwick Boseman's final performance.
Yep.
The only film that we can see of him posthumously. It follows, the mother of the blues, Ma Rainey. Again, a spectacular performance by
Hmm.
Viola Davis.
Hmm.
She clashes for control over her music with a white manager. Meanwhile, the trumpeter Levy, who is played by Chadwick Boseman, spurs on his fellow musicians into revealing truths that will change their lives during this recording session. So it
Yep.
all takes place in 1920s in 1920s Chicago, inside a recording studio. In sweltering conditions. It's in summer. It's basically a stage play that's been adapted into film.
Yep.
Great performances from Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman.
Hmm.
Vibrant cinematography, great music, great costumes. The thing is, right, this film feels too stagey,
Okay. Yeah.
which is why it doesn't really work as a film.
Uh huh.
But performance wise, Chadwick Boseman and Viola Davis Both deserve nominations for supporting actor and lead actress, respectively, lah.
Yep.
Yeah, man. And lastly, I kind of want to mention Mank, David Fincher's first film since Gone Girl.
Mhm.
Gorgeous, bracing, immersive trip into 1930s Hollywood, through the eyes of Citizen Kane screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz, as he races to finish the screenplay of Citizen Kane for Orson Welles. It is steeped in glamour, sleaze, glory and corruption. Mank is such a meticulous black and white period drama that is made with dense historical details, and it unpeels the power structure of America's studio system, the
Yeah.
studio machinery. Gary Oldman is getting all sorts of praise for his lead performance, as he does
Mhm.
deserve. Real star MVP though is Amanda Seyfried. She's
Really?
fantastic in this, and the whole movie as a whole is really good. It's a love letter and a cautionary tale
Yeah.
that is layered into a metatextual film.
Mhm.
Very good film. The only thing is that it just feels pacing wise a bit too long,
Okay.
and it doesn't really. The things he has to say are all good. It's just not. The themes just don't cohere as well as I wanted them to be.
Right.
It made my top 25. Don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
it didn't make my top 20, lah.
Mm, 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 mm.
Yeah. There's some of the stuff that I maybe wanted to mention, but I'm saving those for for future episodes. Maybe we'll get back around to those. Oh, Charlie Kaufman's I'm thinking about ending things.
Oh yes, very good.
Oh, the
Very,
most
very good.
challenging film Kaufman has made. That's saying a lot.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
most challenging
exactly.
film Kaufman has made in a long time. It is an existential minefield, like all his films, but just taken to the nth degree. It's kind of a surreal film that follows a young woman who takes a road trip with her full intellectual boyfriend,
Yep.
played by Todd from Breaking Bad. It's she's filled with thoughts of breaking up, and everything she understands kind of begins to unravel around her into this like solipsistic dive into the rift between the mind and the world that's filtered through it. A very impressionistic meditation on aging,
Yeah.
reality, and regrets. For a lot of people who are not like pop culture, like hardcores, right? Like they may not understand some of the things that Kaufman has done here. Like some of the movie discussions are lifted word from actual reviews that I've read, like really popular reviews.
Yeah.
Things like that, lah. Entire discussions about art are taken entirely from reviews too. It's Kaufman is trying to say that where is their original thought,
Yeah.
or are you just subliminally are your opinions subliminally affected by pop culture around you? You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
It's interesting. Like I really really dug it. Perhaps not the best Kaufman film,
No,
but the most challenging Kaufman film
it is.
and
Yeah.
the densest lah.
Yeah, it is definitely the dentist. I'm like, I don't know how he's going to go after this. I don't know if he can get any more dense, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
like he needs to kind of like step back a bit and kind of like look at some of the older work that he's done.
Yeah.
Like such a strange and fascinating presentation, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
But a good movie nonetheless. Yeah.
Yeah, and enjoyed it as well, man. Last thing I do want to mention is a Polish film called Corpus Christi.
Mm,
It is from Polish director Jan Komasa. It is a film of spiritual struggle. It follows a 20-year-old priest. Well, okay, it follows a 20-year-old man named Daniel.
yeah.
He is an ex-convict. He dreams of joining the clergy. When he was in prison, he turned over a new leaf. He's born again, and he wants to become a priest, but he cannot join the clergy because of his criminal past. So instead, he goes to a small town and he impersonates a priest, and he becomes a pillar of that small town community. Clearly, he is not trained traditionally as a priest,
Yeah.
so his unorthodox take on holiness actually seems to have a positive impact on his unsuspecting flock.
Yeah.
The town is actually devastated by grief after a terrible accident that left a bunch of children dead. So he tries to help them heal. And it's led by a terrific performance by Bartosz Bielania. It's such a blistering morality play because there is a real hypocrisy about the town as well. They are hiding ugly lies, much in the same way that Daniel is hiding an ugly lie about his own past.
Yeah.
Um, Great film about crisis of faith. I like films about priests. Yeah, like stuff like doubt and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's why. But Daniel isn't actually a priest, so I don't know whether that counts.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he plays the role of a priest, and I think that's good enough.
He pretends, he
Yeah,
pretends,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. But because he's not so he doesn't skirt around tough topics and issues and all that. He's very direct and straightforward,
yeah.
very energetic. He tends he becomes an accidental priest, an accidental pillar of the community, and it's really really good. I enjoyed it. It's a Polish film.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm gonna talk about this later on, because like I'm gonna force Isa to watch this, and I want to convince it in another thing. There is a midlife crisis movie called Another Round. It's called Drunk in Denmark, but there's a midlife crisis
Oh
movie called
wait,
Another Round, starring Matt Mikkelsen.
yeah, I've seen the trailer for this.
Fucking phenomenal, man. I missed it in 2020. It would have been in my top 25, but I missed it. I caught it at like December 2nd.
Yeah,
Sorry, in January 2nd or January 3rd or something. God, man, I'm so upset. This
yeah.
like slipped my radar.
The premise itself is fascinating, right? Like with the number of teachers that we know personally,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like it is so fascinating. So, yeah, I'm down to watch it. I'm down to watch it for sure, and then we'll talk
Yeah.
about it.
I wanted to compile it into a midlife crisis theme film.
Yeah.
Uh I don't know whether you've seen Sideways.
Yes, I've seen Sideways. Yeah, we
Okay,
can
yeah.
do a midlife crisis episode. Sure.
Yeah, the Sideways, and then like last year there's also another film that came out called The 40-Year-Old Version.
Oh,
Uh
yeah. Mhm.
yeah, that's really good also. It's about a playwright, a very successful playwright, a black playwright in her 40s, finding her career has stalled. Then she decides to become a rapper.
Yeah.
Clearly a midlife crisis there, but also a creative crisis as well. Yeah, I was thinking about like pairing that together. Maybe in the coming couple of months we can talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Sounds good.
Yeah, Sideways and Another Round are actually pretty similar. It's about like a bunch of middle-aged dudes like looking to escape via alcohol.
Yeah, the context is slightly different, but yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and next time we'll be joining you. We'll be talking about honorable mentions for television.
Mhm.
I have recommended a short little dramedy called called Feel Good. I'm sorry.
Yep.
That stars Canadian comedian Mae Martin. But it's set in London. She has moved to London. It's kind of a very small but poignant story about addiction, sobriety, and lesbian relationships. I've also recommended a sprawling documentary called City So Real, which follows the 2019 Chicago mayoral elections, which,
Yep.
get this, had 21 different candidates on the ballot. Uh,
Wow.
Insanity, and just so happens that the final episode, they were filming the final episode, COVID hits, so it also functions as like a bit of an early documentary into COVID's first impact on Chicago.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Mm,
Yeah, and
mm.
also how like the politician that we also believed in the documentary, the one who eventually won, who promised such big things, handled COVID so badly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you live long enough to see yourself become the villain lah.
Yeah.
And finally, I want to talk about Mythic Quest. I know some of you probably have heard about this. It's a pretty hype show.
Yeah.
But the thing is, right, like I find that nobody ever turns on their Apple TV Plus. Like
Well,
it's
yeah.
yeah, so many good things on there.
There are, but like, I mean, again, right? There's just so many things available at any given point.
If you have an Apple product, you have 1 year free trial. I'm telling you, you should get on Apple TV Plus. There's a lot of good shit there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe people will be more open to it after we're done talking about Mythic Quest.
Mm,
Yeah, we've
yeah.
covered quite a few Apple shows, right?
On genre, yeah.
Yeah,
Wolf Walkers, for example, was an Apple show.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but like there's some good stuff also. Like Ted Lasso is on
Mm,
um Apple TV Plus. Little America is good. Ted Lasso is one that I want to kind of package in the future as kind of a feel good comfort show.
hmm.
Ted Lasso stars Jason Sudeikis. He is an American football coach who goes to England to try to coach English football. I mean, the premise itself sold me lah. I loved it. But like what I did not expect was for Ted Lasso to be like the live action Paddington,
Really?
which is what it ended up being. Like it's just a story about a really nice guy who truly believes that success is not measured on the field, but success is how he can make his players and his assistant coaches, the managers, and everyone in his team make them the best people they can be. That is his definition of success.
Right. Okay.
And to them the results on the field, and he feels that if he can make them better people, they will perform better. That's essentially what Ted Lasso is about. It's fantastic. It's great. It's Paddington live action.
So what episode are we bundling this under?
Man, I kind of wanted to do an episode about like sports shows.
Okay.
Either that or I will bundle this together with Paddington as like feel good things.
Okay.
But there are also like strangely enough a lot of sports shows that are not about the sport, are not about the players playing the sport, but
Yeah.
about ancillary people around.
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
one of my favorite shows is Brock Meyer, who's about a baseball commentator.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
There's another show by Aaron Sorkin from ages past, back in the 90s, called Sports Night. It's about broadcast hosts,
Yeah.
ESPN Sports Center type people who run a Sports Center type show. Things like that. There's a movie called Moneyball. Whoa,
Well.
weirdly again by Aaron Sorkin actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, about management and stats. Basically, they're employing a new algorithm to help them draft players.
Yeah.
Uh, it's interesting. Yeah, yeah, people on the periphery of sports, like not the players themselves. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like that would be a fascinating kind of like episode. I think. Always
yeah,
down for that.
yeah. It's like it just occurred to me that Aaron Sorkin did two of them. He must have some interest in sports, I guess.
Well, if we do end up covering that, I think there'll be a pretty interesting discussion to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, Sorkin is into politics and he's into sports. Those are the
Same.
only two things he does.
Yeah.
He made one show about comedy that wasn't funny, so that's hilarious. Studio City and the Sunset Strip sucks, man. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, yeah, 2020 weirdly a good time for movies. Before we leave off, what are your most most anticipated films of this year?
Most anticipated films of this year. I'm
The start,
looking. I'm looking
yeah,
forward
like
to Black Widow for sure.
Black Widow's number one. Okay,
Yeah. What else is coming out? Wait.
I'm
Uh,
surprised that Dune wasn't the first thing of your lips.
well, that's because I'm not really sure if it's going to be released this year.
Oh, true. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
From what I understand, that if we are lucky, it'll be end of the year.
Mm.
But I doubt so.
Mm-hmm.
Given the things that are going on, so yeah, I kind of like I don't want to get my hopes up just because I really 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 am very invested in this Dune movie.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I kind of like mentally just cross that off for now until
Okay.
they announce it differently. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Fair enough.
yeah. What else? I mean, what are you looking forward for too?
Dune is definitely my number one, but as you mentioned, I'm not sure it's coming out either. The thing I'm most looking forward to. Okay, there is a Sopranos prequel called The Many Saints of Newark
Mm,
by David Chase.
yeah,
It's supposed to be released on the big screen. I'm not sure, but if not, HBO Max has it. That's the one I'm looking forward to the most because I'm a huge Sopranos fan.
yeah.
And this is a big screen prequel, I think, focusing on Tony Soprano's dad. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, very interesting. Tony Soprano will be in the film as a little baby. Obviously, James Gandolfini has passed, so they're
yeah.
not going to de-age him into a child. But yeah,
That
yeah,
would
I'm
be
really looking
hilarious
forward to that.
though.
The Sopranos is like when I talk about like greatest shows of all time,
Mhm.
which is The Wire, mind you. Like, there's no question, The Wire is the greatest show of all time.
Yeah,
But I always say to people like all these greatest shows of all time, Breaking Bad, The Wire, Better Call Saul, all these prestige shows, right, The
yeah,
Americans, etc., etc., would not exist without The Sopranos.
yeah,
It is the original prestige show. It opened the doors for that kind of storytelling.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Many things of New York.
Mm.
What's the other
That's
one?
that's my number, and also Eternals, mind you, but mostly because I'm a huge fan of Chloe Zhao. Um,
Mm,
we will talk about Chloe Zhao soon when Nomadland opens in Singapore.
yeah.
Chloe Zhao has a very non-narrative style. Her movies are like Honeyland, basically,
Uh-huh.
except scripted. Like if you've seen The Rider or if you've seen Nomadland, it's very much like Honeyland, lah. Very
Yeah.
unscripted, very non-narrative, very unadorned. And for her to tackle a cosmic adventure in the MCU with the Eternals
Mm,
is so mind-boggling to me.
yeah.
Number one, I was questioning like Feige's decision to hire her for a film of this scale. It's like,
Yeah.
aren't you kind of pairing the wrong director with the wrong film?
Eh,
I was pretty shocked to find out that Chloe Zhao asked Kevin Feige to do this film. Like
really?
she wrote a spec script and sent it to him. Like she like probably the only person in the world that is a big fan of the Eternals because, dude, we are comic book people. We are not
Yeah.
big fans of the Eternals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, it's a. Okay, okay. Let's not get into Eternals now. This is not the right time to do that. But yeah, I mean, like, I think it'll be fairly interesting. I think the casting choices have been pretty interesting as well.
Yes,
So we'll
yeah,
see how that turns out.
yeah. It's the director choice that puzzles me.
Yeah. I mean, as far as that goes, I think I'm looking forward to Raya and the Last Dragon.
Yeah, Southeast Asia.
the
Yeah.
Southeast Asia one. I just want to see how they're gonna do that.
Mm.
Yeah, but other than that, is Shang-Chi this year?
Shang-Chi supposedly next year.
Next year, okay. So I can like just cross that off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. Is there anything
Yeah.
else?
Matrix 4 is coming out this year, stuff
Uh,
like that.
I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see.
On
Yeah.
the local front, I do have some news. I don't think I can reveal it yet, lah. But a little Singaporean documentary called Sementara by our friend Juan
Hmm.
Urbenda, released that he co-directed it with another person, of course. It's supposed to be released in the first quarter of 2021. Although I did manage to catch it at SGIFF.
Uh huh.
Great Singaporean documentary. I would highly recommend you go seek it out lah, when it's released.
Yeah. Okay, I take that back. HBO has confirmed that Dune is October 1st.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. So
Because
like, yeah, Dune's back on the menu.
yeah, because HBO has HBO Max, right? Like the whole controversy was whether it was going to be released in cinemas or on streaming.
Yeah.
And if Legendary Pictures loses their lawsuit, it's going to be released on HBO Max.
Mm, mm,
The
mm.
thing is, like their lawsuit, I understand.
Yeah,
Where they're coming from. Dune should be watched on the big screen. The thing
for
is,
sure.
HBO is not taking away that option for you. It's all their debuts that they're proposing. It's going to be released on the big screen and at home simultaneously.
Yeah.
What Legendary Pictures is worried about is their bottom line, of course,
Yeah,
because
of
they take
course.
a percentage of the box office profits. But they're framing it as this like, oh, it deserves to be seen on the big screen, etc. You promised us in the contract that it will be released in cinemas. The thing
Yeah.
is, a lot of people are misinformed when they are railing against HBO Max.
Yeah.
HBO Max is not taking that away. It will still be released on the big screen. If you want to, you can go to a cinema and watch it. The thing is that there are many people who don't want to go to cinemas right now,
Hmm.
and you need to give them an option. What are you going to push Dune to 2024? Like what's the other option? I like just put it out lah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand. I think like any Dune fan worth his salt or spice in this case,
Mm,
it's gonna want to watch it in the cinema, right? Like anybody who knows Villeneuve is gonna want to watch it in cinemas anyway. Anybody who knows anything about Dune is gonna want to watch it in the cinema, right? And if you're one of those who don't want to be in cinemas right now or can't be in cinemas, which is fair enough,
yeah,
then at least you have the option, right? I
yeah.
don't think that it's going to really. I mean, people not being able or wanting to be in cinemas is what's going to eat into Legendary's bottom line, and it's not going to be HBO Max putting it on streaming.
Yeah, I mean, Legendary is like acting like COVID was HBO's fault.
Yeah.
Like they're just offering audiences another option. If you don't want to risk your health, you can go watch it at home. And
Mm,
honestly, it is a wise choice. But if you're a big fan of Villeneuve and you want to watch it in cinemas, they're not taking that option away from you. You can
yeah.
do it. And frankly, cinemas, man, I'm going on a rant about cinemas right now. Cinemas have done shit for the last 20 to 30 years to deserve our money.
It's
They have
true.
not evolved.
Hmm.
They've done nothing. They've just sat back on their fat asses and like charge $14 popcorns. The screens are dirty, the sound is terrible,
Yeah.
the floors are sticky. They do nothing to stop people from talking on their phones, checking texts, in the middle of a cinema, people coming in late and shit like that, in the middle of a scene walking across you. Dude, cinemas are terrible. Fuck the theatrical experience. Not because I hate big screens, but
Hmm.
because I hate the way that major cinema chains are being run.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, it is the small boutique distributors like the projector that's going to survive COVID because they actually make an effort to build a community and
Hmm.
to build like a good space for cinephiles to be here lah. The
Yeah.
other cinemas are just fucking fast food chains that just like don't do anything. We press play, then you give them like $50, for your popcorn and your M&Ms and your ticket and your drink. Like it's good lah. Like this is what happened to all those fucking cab drivers who
Yeah.
refused to take me home and said, "Oh boy, I cannot accept nets. Fuck off lah." Then Uber came along, and what happened to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a long pent up rant that we wanted to say for a
No,
long
I
time.
totally understand. I mean, like,
Yeah.
innovate or die, right? And I think COVID
Mm.
has definitely proved that. You know, we we will see if anything changes. We really will. I mean, like, we're on the cusp of vaccination and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, but again, like with what streaming services are doing now, they're knocking on the door. If you don't innovate, you're gonna die. So we'll see if anything
It,
does change.
Indeed, man. Yeah. And that about wraps it up for this episode of Behold. We will be back soon with the honorable mentions for best TV of the year. Till then, this is it, Zero.
This is Isa.
Goodbye, guys.